So we've just finished tying the rebar in the retaining wall footings on the lot. It's been a big job. 2,000 pounds of rebar is a lot of rebar to cut into pieces and tie in place. And I'm reminded of how great these tools are. This is a channel lock. It's worn off, but this is a channel lock wire tying plier. And you say, well, why in the world would a pair of pliers, such a basic tool, be called a wire tying plier? Everything about this is specifically designed, shaped, conceived for grabbing and pulling and twisting tie wire. The distance that the teeth stop, the gap that is set between the jaws of the plier, is exactly the gap that you need to bear down on a piece of tie wire. The cuts, the teeth, the knurling, the checkering on the jaws are oriented to specifically hold and keep from slipping out wire that's held parallel to the long axis. There are cuts or knurling in here that are in the right place so you can grab wire like this and then pry off of a piece in order to get a big stretch. You see that little shoulder right there? You think, well, that's kind of an interesting shape. I've never seen that on a pair of pliers. That's because when you are tying and you grab it, that creates a fulcrum where you can stretch the piece tight and pull the slack out of your tie. You see that? There's a fulcrum built into those. You see that the cutting bit, the cutter is a little longer than you would expect, perhaps. That's because when you're cutting these things, you want to be able to just get a hold of it and not look down and make sure that you're in the tooth, but have certainty that it's going to cut. And unlike some pliers, the cutter goes all the way to the back. So you can slam it until it comes tight and cut it. Cool. The mechanism is pretty tightly machined. It is perfectly smooth. It needs to be perfectly smooth because there's a spring in there. You see that? Holds itself open. That's so the neutral position on these things is open in your hand. You don't have to have two hands to get a hold of it and open it up ever. It's open and ready to do the work. See that little bend? That's so when that thing is open and hanging in a loose grip, it'll hang against your little finger, and when it comes time to pull a piece of wire, come here wire, you're not just resisting the slip with your grip, but rather it pulls against your little finger. This is an example of an elegant design, refined over years, undoubtedly sent out a few times onto the job and reviewed by people who are doing it. If you need to tie rebar, ever, use it as a justification to go buy a pair of channel lock wire tying pliers. They will work for other tasks. You'll be pleased to use them in your electrical work, though they're not ideal for electrical work. They're handy to have around the house if you need a pair of pliers generally. Wiring things together is not unique to rebar or concrete work, is it? I mean, wire is a great way to tie things. You don't have to understand knots, you just have to be able to twist. Here's a newer pair. Okay, I've got 2 or 3 of these. These don't have many miles on them. You see how that rubber cover is not stripped off yet? It soon will be, and I'll show you why. Every so often, you use wire for pulling over a longer distance. For instance, if I wanted to pull the top of this concrete stake over into contact with this concrete stake, I can go around there a few times, and then if I come to the middle and I take this handle that has the rubber slicked off and I put it between there and begin to wind this up, what do you think is going to happen? Eventually, it's going to bend those concrete stakes until it pulls a nail or the wire breaks. I pull the plastic off there so it'll slip in and out of this tightening apparatus. You can use that to straighten a form. You can use that for a lot of things. And if you're going to do that, you got to get the rubber off the straight handle. Now here's something that you can learn the hard way. And that is, if you let your little children play with one of these, the first thing they're going to do is think, wow, there's a spring. I wonder if it'll come out. And they're going to reach in there and they're going to grab that spring and they're going to pull it out. And then you got nothing, okay? But I guess the cost-benefit analysis is this: letting your little ones learn to use tools and appreciate tools versus having to buy a replacement spring. Let your kids play with this, but don't bark at them when they wreck the spring, okay?